This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. A cattle market update with Iowa State University livestock economist Lee Schulz kicks off today's show. Lee also reviews the other disappearance category on USDA Cattle on Feed reports. K-State's Beef Cattle Institute continues the show as Brad White, Bob Larson, Brian Lubbers, and Phillip Lancaster discuss listener questions about replacement heifers and cattle coming back as open. Finishing today's show is another segment of Faces in Agriculture with Zoe Kaiser from Gove and Sheridan County. She explains her rural life and what makes her excited for the future of agriculture. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update. And this week, we're joined by Iowa State University livestock economist Lee Schulz. Lee, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me again.
Lee, what are we seeing on the cash cattle market?
Well, I think a word to term this week is really reeling. If any markets maybe held up a little bit, it is the cash side of things as we look at cash fed cattle prices were down roughly $2 to $3 compared to the prior week. Obviously, that's been pressured by futures markets, which, as you look at the live cattle market, was roughly down $8 per hundredweight across contracts. We're making some contract lows, especially out in some of those distant contracts. Feeder cattle markets are down anywhere from $9 to $10 per hundredweight, and really, it's the psychology in this market that we're trading news and rumors and such about the impacts of high-path avian influenza as it's been found in dairy cattle, and you know those impacts now have and news has stretched for about 2 weeks now, and we're seeing the impact on our cattle markets. Important to really highlight though that HPAI cannot be transmitted to humans by eating meat or poultry products. And so all products are safe to eat, but it's really, just seeing how markets and psychology can happen in these markets. And that's really flowed over as well as we look at the box beef trade. So box beef is down roughly $8 to $10 per hundredweight for the week, regardless of how you look at it, Friday to Friday or average changes over the week. So we've really seen these down markets and not really fundamentally driven. As we look at, we still remain fundamentals very tight in cattle supplies, as well as demand has held up for product movement of beef.
And as we talk about beef and all the cattle market quite often, we often mention the Cattle on Feed report when that does come out. And Lee, you recently wrote an article that talks about how that Cattle on Feed report is put together.
Yeah, so this article, and it'll be available in several of the Iowa State University outlets. Looking at our Ag Decision Maker newsletter is probably the easiest one for listeners to go grab it and take a look at it. And why I wrote this is, one is I did note that as you looked at January of this year, we had a really high other disappearance category, 81,000 head, and the other disappearance is not a headline number. So what we're usually looking at is the cattle on feed inventory as of the first of the month, and then the placements and marketings from that prior month. And those are what drive markets, what we have pre-report expectations for and everything. But this other category, you can think about it a bit as the residual. So it allows for that balance sheet approach when you look at what the cattle on inventory is 1 month, placements and marketings, and then other disappearance, you have to equal what those cattle on feed are for the next month. So that other disappearance, maybe you call it a little bit of a fudge factor to help get those numbers to really add up.
And so what usually gets pushed into that other disappearance category?
So it is defined by USDA, and I think that is important because this helps in when producers are answering surveys, they can categorize some cattle and put them in this other disappearance category. So what should appear in there is death loss, movements from feedlots to pasture, and then shipments of cattle from that feedlot to another feedlot for further feeding.
And what is an exception for when it comes to figuring out what that number is?
So when you dig further into USDA's definitions, what survey respondents should only be including in there is cattle that are on feed. So it shouldn't be cattle that are being backgrounded and are intended to be put in a different lot for finishing, and or cattle that they intend to put back out to pasture. Now, the one exception is potentially that producers do sometimes pull heifers out of feedlots for breeding. You can maybe think of these as like two-way heifer. And so, and in environments or situations like this where we're on the precipice of expansion and we're seeing higher values for replacement heifers, you may start to see this a little bit more happening. And another time of the year is typically in May when pastures start to green up. You may kick a few of those heifers out for replacements from feedlots. Well, if they were intended to be finishing and then we're breeding them and putting them on pasture, that may be a case where those animals end up in that other feed category, the other disappearance category.
And Lee, you mentioned expansion, and in this article, you make the comment of maybe it's not talking about when producers will start rebuilding the herd, but rather it should be when will producers stop liquidating. And what do you really mean by that, and what are you seeing with it?
So this has to do with when you look at potentially pulling heifers out of feedlots for breeding purposes, because one way to say, well, that number's pretty high, and to use other data to identify that as well, when you look at the cattle inventory report, the heifers for beef cow replacement number was lower. But also we've seen heifer slaughter lower, and you've seen the really record levels of heifers on feed right now. And so I think that's an indication that we may be pulling a few more heifers out of those feedlots, and is an indication that we haven't really been expanding yet. If you have 40% of heifers on feed as the total inventory, as a percent of the inventory, that means that most of those are going to slaughter, right? When we're in really strong expansionary phases, it's about 30% of the inventory is heifers on feed. So I'm looking to the next couple of cattle on feed reports to see if we start seeing that number tick back down. And then again, that's an indication maybe we're going to stop the liquidation and start the expansion, which is likely to occur sometime here in 2024. In some regions, nationally, it's more like 2025.
And Lee, how are all of these numbers collected?
So this is a cattle on feed survey. So the survey is going out to feedlots and collecting this data. Now realizing, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that everyone's doing their best to report the data and collect the data, but there can be some mistakes or just difficulties in reporting. If you think of feedlots, cattle can be placed in and marketed out of feedlots every day. So it's really hard to track. So that's another reason it's important to have these other disappearance categories. Now, as we think about cattle on feed reports, so as markets can react to surprises in those cattle on feed reports. So it is really important that we are properly providing the data and calculating the data and publishing that data, because if it's not representative of the current situation, we could have markets reacting to that. And then, in following reports, if there's some revisions or adjustments, the markets are going to react to that. So that can add some volatility to this. So it all goes to the challenges of providing this supply data that markets will react to.
Lee, on the topic of reports then, wanting to mention the recent USDA Hogs and Pigs report.
So this was released on March 28th, and so I've had quite a bit of time to really dig into this report. And I think at a high level, it's important to highlight that, we're seeing pork supplies that are continuing to grow. They're growing not because producers are expanding the breeding herd, but we're seeing increases in productivity, some of the strongest levels we've seen. So litter rates for hogs have seen now 4 quarters of large year-over-year increases. So that continues to bring really large pig crops to the market. And certainly has been pressuring prices for hog producers. Now, luckily, demand has really rebounded for pork, and that's helped the pork market. As this relates to the cattle market, I think anytime you're seeing, more pork supplies on the market, that's obviously competing meat, and it has some potential there to impact demand for beef. But, I think it's nothing new that we've seen in the market. Hog supplies have remained relatively large, as we've seen now cattle supplies can continue to tighten. So a bit of going in different directions as we look at those two markets.
And as we are thinking about the hog and cattle market, and also bringing in the grain market and how you've seen all of that interact from a recent article from the U.S. Meat Export Federation.
This article really piqued my attention as we looked at the value of beef and pork exports to the grain and oilseed markets. And so this report that was commissioned by USMEF found that these U.S. pork and beef exports contribute an estimated total economic impact of 14.6% per bushel to the value of corn and 13.9% per bushel to soybeans. And why that's important is it really shows the value of marketing that corn and soybeans through cattle and hogs, and further marketing those two destinations abroad in our key export markets. And I'll really highlight, as you think about now corn and soybean prices declining here, the value of those exports remain even stronger, because that's certainly a strong demand pull that we get from those markets. Now, as you look at the beef exports, unfortunately, we've seen those lower this year so far, as higher prices have made us a little bit less competitive on the export market. And we're seeing a lot of competition from places like Australia that have been seeing some increases in their production lately.
Lee, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you next time.
That was Iowa State University livestock economist Lee Schulz. I will link the resources that he mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Monday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. Today, we're joined by Brad White, Brian Lubbers, Bob Larson, and Phillip Lancaster.
Let's jump into, so we got a great listener question asking about saving heifers from heifers. And there's a lot of components to this question, because it may or may not be a good idea depending on how you have planned out your breeding program. Bob, I'm going to start with you. Give me some initial thoughts. What are some of the things we think about?
Well, it does depend about the heifers themselves and the bulls that they were mated to. But one of the reasons to maybe not keep heifer calves born to heifers was the bull selection that created that heifer. A lot of times we will use a low birth weight bull, and a lot of times that was our primary focus when we selected that bull. So we may have given up some other traits, some growth traits. And then interestingly, so from an EPD standpoint, or even just think about what happens in real life, the calving ease EPD for that bull, for his offspring, is one characteristic. So how small are his calves? The other thing to think about is what's called maternal EPDs for calving ease, maternal calving ease. And that's how likely his daughters are to have calving difficulties. And interestingly, those two things are often working against each other. So a bull that has really good calving ease, he has calves with small skeletons. Well, then those daughters, if they get pregnant and they get ready to have a calf, they have a small skeleton, including a small pelvis. And so we may have great calving ease from his offspring, but his offspring's offspring may have calving difficulty. And so that's a reason to at least look real closely about how much selection pressure did I put on that calving ease. And I put a lot of selection pressure on that. I may not want to keep his daughters.
And it ties into, and you mentioned this a little bit, but it ties into frame size. Brian and Phillip, where do you guys see frame size as a part of this equation? Or is that exactly what Bob was talking about?
So I actually got this question in person, and I talked to this person a little bit more. And I did make the comment that, if you are going to keep heifers from heifers, frame size is going to be important, right? So questioning is a little more complicated because, it's easy to talk about, well, ideally we do this and ideally we do this, but if you're expanding your herd, what's the best option? And so it becomes a little more nuanced than I think just yes or no. But so my recommendation was, if you're going to keep heifers from heifers, frame size is going to be important. And the other kind of topic we discussed is how do they fit into your breeding season? So you're probably going to be keeping the heifers that calve earlier because otherwise they're going to be behind and you're going to miss your calving window. So those are kind of my comments.
I guess one of my big concerns is just not knowing a whole lot about the cow. So the heifer that's giving birth to the heifer is just in her second year of life, and you don't know much about her. You don't know about her longevity. You don't know about her reproductive performance over the years. Is she going to be able to maintain that 365-day calving interval? You don't know much of anything about her. And a lot of these traits are lowly heritable, so the environment is a big influencer. And so I really want to have a good phenotypic understanding of that female before I start saving replacements out of her. And so the only way I would be comfortable doing it would be as if I have good records and I know the cow line that heifer came out of, and then I might be okay saving a heifer replacement out of her as a heifer.
Okay, so you guys have talked about some of the maybe negatives, maybe detractions. I'm going to spin it around and say I like it. And then I like it because I can get heifers from heifers that are born early in the season, but I've got a couple caveats. One being if I'm AIing my heifers, which we have not talked about. So you talked about the challenges with genetics. There are some AI sires that I can use, which will give me maybe that trade-off between I don't have so much calving problems the first year and I'm producing decent females, but I have to select with that in mind. I'm not selecting for a terminal carcass. I'm selecting for I'm making replacement heifers from my replacement heifers, but I start with that plan. I like the idea, but I'm not keeping heifers from all of my heifers. I want to keep heifers from those that get AI bred that calve the few weeks before the cows.
I was going to say, too, another positive about it might be that I am boosting the genetic potential of my herd quicker, because the heifer that I had hopefully has the best genetics. I'm using the best AI sire or the best sire. I'm going to keep a heifer out of her that I'm going to then breed to the best sire that I can get. And so I'm going to boost my genetics in my herd overall much quicker because I'm saving them out of the best genetics every time.
So I think we've effectively argued both sides of this equation.
which I think you need to look at the individual heifers and the individual situation. So you wouldn't necessarily save heifers out of heifers, but you wouldn't discount it as a possibility.
But if you planned it, I think you can save heifers out of heifers. If you're just going, man, that's a nice heifer out of the heifer, I would maybe debate that a little bit, because some of those things, and I like, Philip, you brought up the phenotypic. Bob, you brought up the genetic. I can't see that genetic side. So knowing that calving is maternal and knowing some of her other maternal traits, her milk production, what's her frame size going to be, makes a big difference on whether I should keep her in the herd.
Oh, and I was just going to say, too, we said if you've planned it, it's a good idea. If you say, well, that's a nice heifer, I'm going to keep it, maybe you debate it. But then there are some clear no's, too, right? Like if this is a heifer that was born or bred late in the heifer breeding season and she's behind and she's small, like that's a clear no, you should not do it in that case, too.
I want to switch listener questions. And we got a great listener question from Alberta. And it was asking about, and one, they started off and Dr. Larson said, man, this is one of my favorite questions ever, because they started out talking about their love of spreadsheets and being a spreadsheet person. So they've got all their cows in the spreadsheet. And this is one of the reasons you do this, is you go back and you start to pick up maybe anomalies, things that you don't expect to be happening. And they found that they had a couple of cow lines that ended up where the cow would turn up open, and then next year one of her offspring would turn up open, or maybe the next year. So it seems like in some of those maternal lines they're coming up open. And the question is basically, is this a fluke or is there something more to it? Because they've seen it happen a few times in their herd. Bob, you want to start out?
I would like to dig into this spreadsheet more, because one of the first questions is, well, how is the fertility in this herd to start with? Is it pretty good fertility and we're just looking for a few little anomalies? Or is it a little less than we would really like? And this is kind of the start of an investigation of why our breed up isn't as good as it should be. So we don't know that information, but that's one of the things I would ask. In general, this specific question, the way they ask it, and they did send some data with it, is I don't think it's probably a genetic issue. There is a genetic component to fertility, but it's pretty low. And in the cows that they showed us, they had gotten pregnant. The females had gotten pregnant for several years and then showed up open. And that's not typically what I think of as a real problem, getting pregnant. That being said, there's a couple of things that could cause some less fertility in cow groupings. One, this was a pretty large herd. They had, 400 or 500 cows. And depending on how their breeding pastures are set up, a lot of times in a large breeding pasture with multiple bulls, the cows will grow into, pods, groups, and they have their 1 or 2 bulls with each group. And there's not a lot of human intervention about how many cows, how many bulls, those types of things. And in my opinion, a lot of times family cow lines tend to hang out together. So it could be just that this family line ended up in an area with not enough bull power or some subfertile bulls. I mean, that would be kind of a weird way where a family line, it's not really genetics, but it is that the fact that they hang out together. I don't know that was going into this herd, but that's another way to investigate what's going on. The other thing, there is one disease that kind of gets passed from mother to daughter that can cause pregnancy loss or abortions, and that's the disease Neospora. The reason I don't think that's in this case is almost always that pregnancy loss is in the first pregnancy, sometimes the second pregnancy after they're infected. So it goes from the dam to the daughter during pregnancy. Usually where you'll see the abortions is when that daughter is a heifer and it's her first pregnancy. And that's not really what they report in this case. But all of that to be said is I would start with, how good is the fertility in this herd? Is it pretty good and we're just kind of trying to find the last few things to work on? Or does it need to get better? And this is maybe the first thing we're just starting a view of trying to figure out where the losses are occurring. Are they not getting pregnant? So I think it warrants looking into in more depth.
So one of the things I would throw out is fertility is not as highly heritable, but I have said before, the calendar can appear heritable. So if you have a cow that's calving, if I have a confined calving season and she calves late in the calving season and I save her heifer, it is more likely her heifer will get bred late in the calving season. She has a higher chance of falling out of the herd. But that's something that could transfer year to year and would appear, for all the records, to look like a genetic. What do you think about that?
No, I totally agree. I think when we look at herds that don't have great breed up, a lot of times it is certainly not evenly distributed across the herd, in that cows that calve early tend to get pregnant and cows that calve late tend to be the ones that are open. Of course, that's not 100%, but there's a pretty strong line between those two numbers. And that really has to do with, the number of days that they're cycling and the bull is in the pasture.
Once again, that was K-State's Bob Larson, Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Brian Lubbers. You can listen to the full Cattle Chat episode on the podcast streaming platform of your choice. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show with another segment of Faces in Agriculture. And this week, we're joined by someone in Sheridan and Gove County, Zoe Kaiser. Zoe, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. This will be fun.
Zoe, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in agriculture?
Yeah, so I grew up in Gove in Sheridan County, was a daughter to a fourth-generation farmer. Had no brothers, so really my ag started with my dad saying, come along with me. Really did everything with him, from working on irrigation to starting to run the combine, I think at like age 8 or 10, and then later transitioned into helping with harvest and then planting and all the things. I was kind of my dad's right-hand person until I went off to college. I graduated from K-State in agronomy, ag communications and marketing, and then I had a minor in ag sales. I actually married one of my dad's best friend's oldest sons, which is kind of funny to explain, but he also is from Gove and Sheridan County. And so he went to K-State as well. His name is Luke. He was in animal science, and I think he was also in Ag Econ. And so after K-State, we knew that residing back to where our families farm, his family also farms and ranches in Gove and Sheridan. And so we knew this is what we wanted to do. So after K-State, we made the jump, took a huge leap of faith and moved back home. So my life of being a farmer's daughter has kind of transitioned into being a farmer's wife and also a rancher's wife. And now I also am a crop insurance agent. So I've been doing that for a couple years. And I really love the risk management sector, as well as just being able to help my family, both of our families really. So like a traditional farm in Kansas, we raise corn, milo, soybeans, sunflowers, wheat. And then my husband's family has a registered seed stock operation called Kaiser Angus, which we're just going on our 24th annual production sale. So I really have enjoyed being a part of that. My husband does some custom spreading and spraying, as well as we have a feedlot, and life is just busy, but it's a good balance. And we've very much enjoyed being back home and being able to be involved in such an industry that has molded and shaped us. So,
Zoe, as you've spent so much time in agriculture, what have been some big challenges you've seen and how have you overcome them?
I was trying to think about this a little bit as I was in my travels this week. And I would say the biggest thing is just trying something different and shaping the mold to maybe what our parents have always done, and just trying something different. I think it's pretty easy in the industry to, think, well, my grandparents did it this way, and then my parents did, and well, we're going to do it that way. And we've just been pretty intentional about trying to do things differently, and just trying to think about things maybe in a different light, or with some of the mentoring we've got from college or others. So just being able to, overcome the challenge of maybe some of the issues that come with that, as well as just being different and doing things differently. So,
as you seem to want to continue to be in agriculture, what makes you excited for its future?
I am really excited to see other people, maybe in my generation or even younger, choose to live in rural areas. I feel like rural by choice is kind of maybe where Luke and I have always stood and where we stand today. And I think I'm most excited to see maybe what the industry does to bring people back to rural Kansas, and maybe the jobs and careers that allow them to either continue working with family farms or maybe work on a transition plan with other folks in their small town areas. There's just a lot of growth that is going to be happening. And really from the risk management sector, I'm just excited to see both my customers and other producers think about maybe their bottom line in a different way as we move forward. It's been a topic before and we've always been talking about it, but there's a lot of new products out, and just being able to really shift our mindset. And I know I've talked about mindset before, but that's the biggest thing that I think we'll see and that I'm most excited for. So,
Zoe, if people would like to keep up to date with what you're doing in rural Kansas, is there a way they can do that?
They could just call me or text me. I try to just leave the door open. I have a couple people that I'm helping find internships and find jobs that allow them to be rural by choice. And so that's a really big passion of mine. I do sometimes share on Facebook. I'm not really great about posting, but sometimes I post things that we're up to or maybe small updates throughout the growing season. So I'm happy with. So I just am really thankful you decided to have me on, and look forward to continuing to see our growth as well as just the entire growth of the industry and moving forward. So
that was Zoe Kaiser, who's involved in agriculture in Sheridan and Gove County. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.